Now, I know we've all been giggling and kicking our feet up for a few days now about the untimely demise of the UnitedHealthcare CEO. I do think, though, that we should talk about what all of this really means and some of the more unfortunate realities that the situation is illustrating. Only thing that this situation confirms is that the US is officially a failed state. When it comes to matters like vigilante justice, especially that vigilante justice being celebrated, and then especially on top of that, the news coverage of this, or should I say lack thereof, his manifesto, the fact that he comes from a rich family, the other fact that they've also released like 17 different mugshots of this guy. And I want y'all to know that that's failed state propaganda. The reason there is so much of this propaganda is because of the utter failure of the system. But yeah, I just want to level with y'all as somebody who immigrated here from Ukraine, where stuff like this honestly happens pretty regularly. Like well-known businessmen and like heads of certain organizations get all the time. At the time that I lived there, everybody had universal health care. Same case with Russia. Russia's also a failed state with universal health care. People still get schmurdered in the streets all the time. Vigilante justice does not necessarily mean anything good is coming to you as a country. Vigilante justice only means that the laws have failed to work and the system has failed to protect the citizens. And the citizens have had to take matters into their own hands. So if anything right now, I know it feels right to celebrate, and I don't blame anybody really for celebrating. But at the same time, you should also kind of buckle down and prepare for worse things to come. Vigilante does not a revolution make. What makes a revolution happen is class consciousness, okay? It's like multiple people doing stuff at once. It takes organization. We cannot rely on individual acts of vigilante justice to make the system work, because what the failed state is going to do with that is they're going to make an example out of this person. Like seriously, how many mugshots do we need of this guy? They're putting out these really humiliating ones too. They're making an example out of him so that other people won't do it. By the way, this is failed state behavior. You need to understand that the rest of the CEOs are going to be fine. They're going to work from home. They're going to beef up their security. They're just going to do virtual meetings instead of in person. And they're going to be fine. They will protect their ass because they have millions of dollars to do it. So you need to understand that one person performing an act of vigilante justice does not mean that a revolution is happening. A revolution is happening when everybody's doing something. And I feel like the biggest problem here is that Americans have been brainwashed by American media. It's like the superhero mentality. One person saves the whole world. They want y'all to think that because one person can be captured and made an example out of. But what are you going to do when everybody's out in the streets? Nothing. So y'all need to understand you're falling for the exact propaganda that your country has primed you with your entire lives. Y'all are putting this man on a pedestal and calling him a hero, which again, for what he did, he very well is. That's where the story ends. And we cut away to the credits. Y'all grew up believing that an entire world can just be saved by like one or possibly a small group of superheroes. And this is exactly why things have unfolded the way that they have in America. What I really want to say is that while this was an act of justice and an act of bravery, America as a country is not old enough to really understand the implications of this kind of stuff starting to happen. Some of us grew up with things like this being normal, and it did not mean we were living in a good and safe, prosperous place. Change does not happen like this. This is not change. This is simply a symptom of what's really deeply going on in this country. Please stay safe out there, y'all. Godspeed. I wanted to make a longer version of this for YouTube because I know some of y'all will have seen my videos on the parallels of the collapse of the USSR versus what's happening in America now. And I just want to point out that this is definitely one of those signs, one of those symptoms that people are taking matters into their own hands. This is exactly what happens before the system really starts to falter and fail, especially based on how these things are responded to. It can really be foreshadowing. The writing is on the wall because this man is being made an example out of. So many mugshots, so many like little things that they're doing in the media to discredit him as a beacon of hope or as a vigilante at all. They're not acknowledging his accomplishments. They're really downplaying, like they're trying to make him seem crazy. And this is exactly what a failed state does. They blame their failures on the actions of the citizens, and they will take measures to protect themselves and their oligarch buddies instead of protecting the citizens. The way that the media has responded to this lets you know that that's exactly what's coming down the pipe. The fact that these individual acts of protest or heroism or demonstration, right, these things are not only ineffective, but they are then also used by the state to be made an example out of. Think of Putin versus the band Pussy Riot in Russia, right? They always come out and like they do these demonstrations against him, but it doesn't really matter. They just get made an example out of. They get dragged into jail for like weeks or months or years. Then everybody just continues to despair. This is just FYI, the point that we have unfortunately reached in America. And we've had a succession of these events, like this has been a pattern, especially starting with George Floyd, all of the subsequent, protests and people that came out, marching in the streets, people were making signs, people were uniting, and nothing happened. Like, we elected a different person who changed nothing, who in fact funded the police more. Because of that, you no longer see these big demonstrations in the streets. Like, people are just not doing that. What's even worse is that when they are, like all the anti-war protests that there have been, they have not been reported on, they have not been covered in the news. And in fact, when they have, they've been painted in a very negative light. And in fact, the man that this country has now elected president is actually planning to deport these protesters somewhere, along with all the illegal immigrants. He wants to also deport the protesters. And so basically the people have been told that the more you protest, the worse that it's going to get for you. And Trump set a precedent back when he was in office. When people came out to protest, what they did was put up barricades. Like, he didn't come out, he didn't talk to anybody, his staff didn't come out. This country is supposed to be a democracy, and yet that is not being valued by the government. Like, the government is literally like, no, we'll just put up barricades and we just won't listen to you harder. Like, we're gonna close ourselves off to you even more. And so since that precedent has been set, everything's been going downhill. And you can expect that the same kind of thing is going to happen with the CEOs and everything, because they have the money to protect themselves. They have the money to scrub their presence off the internet. They have the money to travel with security. They have the luxury of just switching to a work from home schedule. They can just take their meetings virtually. They don't even have to step outside if they don't want to. Plenty of ruling class families have done that while still running a country straight into the ground and not giving a single shit about any of the people that live in it. And again, I'm just telling y'all this because I've been there before. I'm really not trying to fearmonger. I'm just trying to give you some realistic expectations of what this all means and what you should be preparing for. Because the media's response to this, the government's lack of response to this, the fact that this has been happening and the government has not only not taken a look at it, but has encouraged it, has gotten into bed with these CEOs and with all of these health insurance companies. The fact that one person had to take matters into their own hands in such a way, and the fact that, again, everybody responded by sitting at home and giggling and kicking their feet up. And that's all intentional as well. This is why prices are going up. This is why the unemployment rate is not getting fixed. This is why they're continuing to drive the economy into the ground, is because that's one of the conditions. Like, the people have to be tired. They have to be too tired to really do anything but sit at home and shrug their shoulders and not be able to organize and not have any community. All of that is intentional. They do not want this to be a democracy. You know, as always, I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm not saying that something good can't come of this. Something good has already come of this, right? A decision was about to be made by another health insurance company that was going to be capping the amount of anesthesia that they would cover under their insurance, and they went ahead and walked that decision back. Hopefully a lot of things like that have been tabled, at least for now. Once again, the fact that the government has not released a statement on this, the fact that the government is not like, oh, this is horrible, oh, we're going to get involved, we're going to lower the prices, we're going to deal with these insurance companies, the fact that no statement like that has been made, the fact that the news coverage of this has been very biased and very unhelpful and very condescending. Like, why don't you guys feel bad for the guy that killed your family members because he had a family? You know, of course there's that narrative. And so that is what worries me. That's what worries me the most, is that the narrative around this has been one of, we are going to make an example out of him, and we're going to make everybody who is outraged by the fact that he had to do this and outraged by the healthcare system, we're going to be outraged at them for not being outraged that somebody has been schmurdered. Just in case you needed any more proof that this whole situation is coming out of a lack of class solidarity, let's remember that it was a McDonald's employee that turned this man in. Somebody who likely doesn't even have health insurance, or under whose health insurance they will probably still not be able to afford to go to a doctor because they get paid so little that they probably are living paycheck to paycheck and cannot afford to go to the doctor or the copay or the bill after or anything like that. Mind you, instead of minding their business, they went ahead and called the police on somebody who committed an act of justice. They called the failed state police because they thought that there was a reward in it for them. And turns out they're actually, to receive the FBI reward, the McDonald's worker would first have to be nominated by an involved agency and then be approved through the committee. If the Secretary of State were to agree, they would then determine how much money the information provided by the employee is worth, up to but likely not totaling the $50,000 advertised. And now obviously everybody's celebrating the fact that this person is going to get shafted, myself included. But it's also like, let's not celebrate too hard, because what this means is that somebody needed that money so badly that they were willing to forego class consciousness. There's no chance that they didn't know how all of us, everybody on the internet, feels about this man. There's no way that they didn't know that they were going to get heat for this and get called a rat and be viewed as a scab and be universally hated. And yet it was still more important to them to collect this advertised, apparently imaginary reward than it was to stand with people of their own class. And once again, that's how you know that you are living in a failed state. When there's no class consciousness and there's absolutely no organized action, only a splintering of the population at the end of the day. Anyways, that's all the thoughts I have for now. Be sure to check out my new podcast and leave us a 5-star review if you haven't already. We also have a Patreon community now that we would love for you to be a member of. We're in there taking requests, suggestions, answering questions. We're posting blogs. Please feel free to check it out if you just want more content in general. Thanks for watching. Godspeed.